that there is a difference between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel prepared from the beginning of the week for Shabbos, but every day he had bitochen, fakert. Beis Shammai was the one that always prepared, and he found a newer one, a nicer behemoth. He took the nicer behemoth. Beis Hillel is Baruch Hashem, Yamas Lonu, Yamas Lonu, Akil. The Eibishter will give us. He has bitochen. So b'meila, it comes to Wednesday, where Shlacheret is the Shita. We go according to Beis Hillel. So we say the first thing is L'chun Ranna, bitochen. Then comes the Shita that a person sees that he has to do something. And that it could be that Lav Dafka is going to have the same schusim as Beis Hillel, that everything will come. So b'meila, he realizes he has to do something. So this is lechidude, that be'etzem, this is the shita of Beis Hillel, bitochen. So the first thing is aknam bitochen. So from Wednesday to Thursday, 24 hours pass, till he realizes he has to do something. So now the Rebbe explains why is it that it's not revealed, not in a revealed state. That what is the marshal of a king in a field, that he's greeted in the field. Since he's greeted in the field, so everybody is found in field clothing. And therefore, it is not obvious that he's the king. And then they are permitted, even more yet, they can, they could potentially. The difference is, the Alter Rebbe writes the Lashon Rashoyin, they're permitted. If you look in footnote 10, this is an addition that the previous Rebbe writes in his Maimer, 1940, beginning with the words L'cho Amar Libi. That everyone that wants to go out to greet him, he greets everybody in a very cordial way. He shows a joyful face to everyone, a joyous face to everyone. Then he goes into the city. Then he comes into his chamber, in the royal chamber. So B'meila is coming from the Sada, he's coming into the field, into the city, and then into Eicham al-Choseh.
Why would you assume that because he's coming to the field, he's dressed like they are? He's the king.
The Maisi is over that when he's coming through the field, he relates to the people in the field, and B'meila, in order that he should be able to relate to them, and they shouldn't become this battle, since they are completely on a lower level than him. They're not just city people, they're field people. B'meila, he relates in a way that he doesn't wear the malchus and everything, all the royal clothing, especially that some of these inyanim are reserved after for the chamber, not when he's on the way. And especially, as we mentioned the mashal in the past, that we take all our presidents, when they go out to the farm people, sometimes don't know who's the farmer, who's the president. When they're sitting with the farmers together, talking about the different economic things, so you give a look, you don't know who is who over there. It doesn't look like a president or something. It doesn't look like he's standing by the State of the Union. It doesn't look like he's distinguished. Okay, so
3 different sets of 40 days we have?
They started from Shivasa B'Tammuz. From Vav Sivan, Matan Torah, till Shivasa B'Tammuz, and then Yudches Tammuz till Chavtes Av, to 29th of Av. Shivasa B'Tammuz, he broke the Luchis. So we went up again for 40 days, Yudches Tammuz till Chavtes Av. Then goes Rishchei Deshel till Yom Kippur.
So why did the second set not do it?
Because they were right after the Egel. This was the angry part.
He already went up to receive the Torah.
But then when he came down, the Luchas were broken. The Egel happened right there after the first 40 days. That was the first reaction that the Eibishter said, Rahman al-Zan, what he wants to do.
But right after that, he said he went up again for 40 days.
He went up for 40 days, so those 40 days were not in the pleasant 40 days. Then he went up Chavtes Av, the third 40 days, so then, on Yom Kippur, the conclusion of the 40 days, the Eibishter said, Salachti kidvarecha.
So Moshe was up on Har Sinai for 3 sets of 40 days? Doing what?
He was learning, it says, he was learning with the Eibishter.
So he learned something he didn't learn in the first 40 days?
There were different yonim. There were yonim of Torah, there's a yonim of Tefillah. He was working hard up there. It says, Bechal, he was learning, he was working. The Gemara, the Medrash says, how did Moshe Rabbeinu know if it's day or night? At the daytime he learned Mikra, at night he learned Mishnah.
Chazorah can't hurt either.
And then it says also the Eibishter gave him time to review. It says Taka, Revach ben Parsha the Parsha he gave him, space between one Parsha and another.
Where does it say that?
In Rashi and Parsha Vayikra, right at the beginning. Vayikra Meish, it says Litn Revach ben Parsha the Parsha. And as the Rebbe explains in a Shabbos, there was once a Shabbos in the calendar every few years. In other time, there is a Shabbos that's called Shabbos Hafsokeh. In other words, there's the four Parshas. There's Parsha Shkolim, there's Parshas Zocher, Pora, and Achedesh. There's sometimes a Parsha Hafsokeh, which is between Shkolim and Zocher. There's an extra Shabbos because Purim falls out later in the week, so there's an extra Shabbos called Shabbos Hafsokeh. When you look at the calendar, it's called Hafsokeh. Hafsokeh means there is an intermission. There's an interruption. We don't read any of the four Parshas then. So now the Rebbe Fabrengt once, it was Tov Shemem, and the whole Fabrengen was concentrating on what does Shabbos Hafsokeh mean. The Fabrengen was really called Shabbos Hafsokeh. I mean, that's actually the way my memories from then were. And that is that the Rebbe was discussing that the inyan of Hafsokeh is not a negative inyan. It's a inyan that we find by Moshe Rabbeinu, that Moshe Rabbeinu absorbed in Yonim of Torah from the Eibishter. So this was to absorb the previous Yonim of Torah. The Rebbe brings an example from Rab Zera. Rab Zera fasted 40 to 100 fasts. He should forget Talmud Bavli. Talmud Bavli. So it says, what should he forget? So the Rebbe asked the question in a different Fabrengen, how could he fast to forget? The Mishnah tells us, you're not allowed to forget in Yonim of Torah. He forgets his chayv. So he says not to forget in Yonim that he learned, forget the method of learning. Forget the method of how we learn Talmud Bavli. Because the format is different. Then in a later Sikha, the Rebbe says, in our earlier Sikha, since I saw it, the Rebbe says, Fakerti Taka forgot it. And he explains the Maila Dafke. It was a very chidush because it was the first time we saw it. The Rebbe says, it was forgetting the inyan alone. And the Rebbe explains it. This is basically what it is. So the Rebbe says the same thing is also when it comes to four parshas. There's an interruption in the middle. The interruption is that a Yid should absorb Shkolim before he goes on to Zocher. That the idea of Machzis HaShekel, the first four parshas, he should absorb that before he goes on to receive the Mechias HaMolik. So he has to absorb first the union of Machzis HaShekel. So the Rebbe brought out and everything how there is. The Rebbe, that day was Vavoder. So the Rebbe says Vavoder is a Shabbos Hafsokeh. What is Hafsokeh? It is Moshe Rabbeinu giving it over to Yeshua. Moshe Rabbeinu was Nistalik Zayin. The day before he was already giving over. It was already Shnei. It doesn't Shabbos Shalmi. It says that there was already giving it over. That he was already taking over. So this was like a buffer between Moshe and Yeshua. A transformation, a giving over, a transfer from Moshe to Yeshua. So the Rebbe says this inyan shows us the ayin be'emtza, the nullification, the buffer in the middle is actually a tachlis, a goal for itself. And b'meila, this is what the Rebbe explained Shabbos Hafsokeh. So our states when the whole world looks at Shabbos Hafsokeh, think, the kriya is going to be a shorter kriya. We won't read one of the four parshas. So the Rebbe takes Shabbos Hafsokeh and says that means to absorb the earlier one. It's not like a person sitting empty-handed. Okay, so then the Rebbe continues. Since this is a parable in Torah, a parable of a king that is going out in the field, all the details of the parable have to be accurate. Why does the Dafke say the Moshel of Melech Basodeh?